1. You can climb to the top and still be hollow if you forgot who sent you. Success might get you applause, but without surrender, you'll only hear echoes in the silence. Don't forget the one who gave you the breath, the gift, and the climb. The summit means nothing if you left your soul at the bottom. 2. Chasing trophies without truth will leave you tired. You can stack up the awards, the titles, the money, but if you're not anchored in something greater than yourself, it won't fill the hole inside. Trophies can't hug you at night. Truth can. 3. Your purpose isn't to be seen, it's to be sent. This life is not about being famous, it's about being faithful. You weren't born to just impress the world, you were born to impact it. And that takes surrender, not just strategy. 4. If you don't lay it down, it will weigh you down. Ego, pride, control. If you carry those into your success, they'll turn your blessing into a burden. Sometimes the greatest strength is surrendering what's not yours to carry in the first place. 1. Success without surrender is still emptiness. We live in a culture obsessed with outcomes. Achievements are worshipped. Trophies, titles, and timelines define our worth. We're told to hustle harder, grind longer, and never stop climbing. And yet, in the quiet corners of success, where the cameras have turned off and the noise dies down, there is often an unsettling silence. A silence that echoes with a deep, gnawing question. Is this all there is? You can win the world and still lose your soul. You can reach every goal, sign every deal, and break every record, but if surrender was never part of your story, success will never satisfy. Because success without surrender is still emptiness. Surrender isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the realization that your power has a limit and your purpose has a source. Many chase success thinking it will fix what's broken inside. They believe status will heal insecurity, that money will cover the fear, that influence will erase the pain. But those things only mask what surrender was designed to mend. You don't need more to feel whole, you need to let go. You need to release the illusion of control and admit that climbing higher doesn't make you stronger if your foundation isn't stable. Without surrender, success becomes a burden rather than a blessing. It becomes something you protect instead of something you share. Surrender is not giving up, it's giving over. It's placing the weight of your life, your calling, your dreams, and your identity in the hands of something greater than yourself. It's trusting that purpose isn't just self-created but divinely assigned. When you surrender, you stop forcing outcomes and start flowing in obedience. You stop building empires and start building impact. The world might not always understand that kind of surrender, but the soul recognizes it as peace. There is a deep rest that comes when you know you're not in this alone. When you realize you don't have to be the architect of everything, you just have to be faithful to the blueprint you were given. It's easy to confuse noise with progress. We see people doing big things, and we assume they're fulfilled. But fulfillment doesn't come from big stages, it comes from deep roots. You can be successful by the world's standards and still be starving spiritually. You can be surrounded by people and still feel isolated. You can be applauded for your strength and still be crumbling inside. Because without surrender, every step forward adds another layer to the mask. Without surrender, you're performing instead of living. You're impressing instead of becoming. True success is not about getting more, it's about needing less. It's about being whole even when everything around you is still incomplete. The irony is that surrender leads to more power than striving ever could. When you stop pretending to be in control of everything, you free yourself to focus on what actually matters. When you let go of trying to be everything to everyone, you start becoming who you were truly created to be. You gain clarity, you gain peace, you gain direction. And you realize that the pressure you were carrying wasn't yours to hold. That the expectations placed on you weren't aligned with your true identity. That the grind was just a distraction from grace. Success without surrender becomes a chase that never ends. But surrender, real surrender, is the finish line you've been looking for in all the wrong places. Sometimes we think surrender is for the desperate, the broken, or the weak, but surrender is for the wise. It takes strength to say, I don't have all the answers. It takes courage to release what you can't control. It takes maturity to know when the ladder you're climbing is leaning against the wrong wall. Surrender doesn't mean you stop working, it means you stop worrying. It doesn't mean you give up on the dream, it means you trust the timing. It doesn't mean you settle for less, it means you allow the right things to come in their time. It's not passive, it's powerful. It's not resignation, it's revelation. Because in surrender, you finally see what matters most. There are people who have everything the world told them they needed and still feel lost. That's not failure, that's misalignment. The house is built, but the heart isn't home. The title is earned, but the soul is tired. The image is perfect, but the person inside is cracking. That's the cost of pursuing success without surrender. It creates a gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. And the wider that gap gets, the more you feel like a stranger in your own skin. You start living for validation instead of vision. You start saying yes to things that drain you just to keep the illusion going. But surrender brings you back to center. It realigns your outer world with your inner truth. One of the biggest lies we're told is that control equals safety, that if we can just hold everything tightly enough, we'll be okay. But control is a cage. It keeps you small. It keeps you scared. It keeps you hustling for peace instead of resting in it. Surrender breaks the bars of that cage. It says, I don't have to have it all figured out to move forward. It says, I can take the next step even if I don't see the whole path. It says, I trust that my life has meaning beyond what I can manufacture. And when you live from that place, success becomes a tool knot, a trap, a platform knot, a prison. Many people reach their dreams and find themselves more anxious than ever. Not because the dream was wrong, but because the foundation was missing. You can't build a life of peace on a mindset of pressure. You can't find rest when your identity is tied to results. You weren't made to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. You were made to move in rhythm with your purpose. Surrender gives you that rhythm. It slows you down so you can hear the right voice. It silences the crowd so you can follow the call. It strips away the clutter so you can live with clarity. Success isn't evil. Ambition isn't wrong. But both become dangerous when they exist without surrender. When your drive is disconnected from your values. When your hustle is louder than your heart. When your desire to rise is greater than your desire to serve. That's when success starts to feel empty. Because it's no longer about impact, it's about image. It's no longer about purpose, it's about position. And no matter how high you go, the emptiness follows. The only thing that can fill that void is surrender. A deep, deliberate, consistent surrender to something beyond yourself. Think about how much time people spend trying to prove their worth. Every post, every purchase, every performance, it all becomes part of the presentation. But surrender frees you from that cycle. You don't have to prove what was already placed inside you. You don't have to earn what was already yours by grace. You don't have to chase what was never meant to complete you. Surrender is the key that unlocks the door to real confidence. The kind that isn't shaken by criticism or inflated by compliments. The kind that's rooted, steady, and secure. Because it doesn't come from you, it flows through you. People often ask, how do I know when I've truly succeeded? The answer isn't found in your bank account, your resume, or your reputation. It's found in your peace, in your ability to rest without guilt, in your willingness to let go when it's time, in your freedom to say no without fear, in your joy, even when the outcome isn't what you expected. That's the kind of success surrender produces. Not just doing great things, but becoming a great person in the process. Not just being known by others, but being known by yourself. The world tells you to keep pushing, to never let up. But wisdom tells you to pause and ask, what am I pushing toward? And who am I becoming along the way? If the destination costs you your soul, it's not worth the journey. If the pursuit of success is killing your joy, it's time to surrender the path. That doesn't mean you stop dreaming. It means you surrender your attachment to how and when the dream must come true. It means you let go of timelines that weren't meant for you and pressure that never came from your purpose. Surrender doesn't remove your ambition, it refines it. It aligns your goals with your calling. It takes your dreams and filters them through wisdom. It helps you distinguish between what looks good and what is good, between what is loud and what is lasting, between what impresses and what impacts. That's the kind of clarity that comes when you stop forcing life and start flowing with it. When you trade striving for surrender, that's when real success begins, not when the world claps for you, but when your soul is at peace with you. Many are afraid of surrender because they think it means losing control. But surrender isn't loss, it's liberation. It's not the end of your ambition. It's the beginning of your anointing. It's not the death of your dreams, it's the resurrection of your purpose. You don't have to carry it all. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know every step before you take the first one. All you need is the courage to lay down what was never meant to define you. Because the truth is, success without surrender is still emptiness. It looks full, but it feels hollow. It sounds impressive, but it feels incomplete. Only surrender fills the space that success was never meant to satisfy. 2. The wilderness isn't punishment. There's something about being in the wilderness that strips you. It pulls off the masks. It silences the noise. It removes the distractions that once made you feel important. And suddenly, you're face to face with the truth of who you are, without the applause, without the title, without the performance. That's the wilderness. It's not a punishment, it's preparation. Because before you walk in the promise, you've got to be ready to carry the weight that comes with it. You can't lead if you haven't been alone. You can't carry influence if you haven't first carried identity. You can't build anything lasting until the parts of you that were never meant to last are burned away. The wilderness isn't glamorous. It's quiet. It's frustrating. It feels like delay. It feels like detour. It can feel like abandonment, but it's the most honest place you'll ever be. Because the wilderness doesn't care who you used to be. It doesn't respond to your credentials. It doesn't bend to your reputation. It demands something deeper. It demands surrender. It demands faith. And most of all, it demands transformation. It takes who you were and starts reshaping you into who you were called to be. Not through comfort, but through process. Not through ease, but through endurance. We often want to skip the wilderness. We want to fast forward to the finish line, get the breakthrough without the breaking, walk in favor without walking through fire. But the fire is necessary. The stripping is sacred. The stillness is strategic. Because in the wilderness, everything unnecessary gets removed so everything essential can rise. Your pride, it's confronted. Your plans, they're challenged. Your expectations, they're rewired. Not to punish you, but to prepare you. Because if you step into purpose too early, it will crush you. If you access the spotlight too soon, it will expose cracks you never took time to repair. The wilderness is grace in disguise. It's where God doesn't give you what you asked for because He's too committed to giving you what you actually need. Preparation always precedes purpose. Look at any great person, and you'll find wilderness seasons in their story. Periods where nothing made sense, where doors closed, where prayers seemed to go unanswered. Where they were hidden, overlooked, isolated. But what felt like rejection was actually redirection. What felt like silence was actually shaping. They were being trained in the dark for what they would carry in the light. Because private battles birth public strength. And when you come out of the wilderness, you're no longer swayed by applause or crushed by criticism. You've seen too much. You've been through too much. You're rooted. You're ready. It's in the wilderness that your identity is tested. When you're not getting results, not being recognized, not seeing growth, who are you then? Do you still show up? Do you still believe? Do you still move in faith? It's easy to trust when everything's working, but can you trust when nothing is moving? Can you obey when there's no affirmation? That's where your character is forged. That's where your calling is confirmed. Because the wilderness asks the question, are you doing this for attention, or are you doing this because you were assigned to it? If the lights stop, if the doors shut, if the crowd walks away, will you still walk in purpose? Will you still say yes? So many people abort their preparation because they confuse discomfort with disapproval. They think the delay means denial, that the struggle means they're off track. But growth doesn't always feel good. In fact, real growth rarely does. The wilderness is not a curse, it's a classroom. Every dry place has a lesson. Every closed door has a purpose. Every silent season is filled with instruction if you lean in close enough. The problem is, we try to escape what we were meant to endure. We try to numb what we were meant to learn from. But nothing grows if it's never tested. Nothing becomes strong if it's never stretched. There's a kind of clarity that only comes from being alone. Not lonely, but alone. Alone with your thoughts, alone with your doubts, alone with your fears. That space where nobody's cheering you on, where no one's clapping, and you have to decide if you still believe in the dream. That's where grit is built. That's where conviction is forged. That's where faith becomes real. Because you're not walking based on what you feel. You're walking based on what you know. You're stepping, even when it's dark. You're obeying, even when it hurts. That's what the wilderness produces. Not just people who are gifted, but people who are grounded. Sometimes the wilderness is disguised as failure. A business that didn't work. A relationship that ended. A plan that collapsed. And it's tempting to define yourself by the rubble. To assume that the setback is your ceiling. But the wilderness isn't the end, it's the edge of transformation. You're being stripped so that what's next can be built on something solid. The disappointment isn't finale, it's formative. It's revealing what needs healing. It's exposing the cracks before you build too high. It's preparing you for a future that's too important to rush. If you let the wilderness do its work, you'll come out stronger, clearer, bolder, and better than anything you left behind. Preparation doesn't always feel like progress. Some days you're just surviving. Some days all you've got is breath. But don't minimize the power of endurance. Staying when it's easier to run. Showing up when it's easier to quit. That consistency is crushing insecurity. That faithfulness is silencing fear. You're being refined, you're being shaped. Even when you don't see it, something sacred is happening. Your roots are going deeper. Your vision is becoming clearer. Your voice is getting stronger. Not for this moment, but for the next. Not just for where you are, but for where you're going. Don't despise the wilderness. Don't rush through it. Don't try to numb it. Embrace it. Learn from it. Let it stretch you. Let it confront you. Let it refine you. Because the version of you that walks into the next season must be different than the one who walked into this one. Some perspectives have to die. Some mindsets have to shift. Some habits have to break. That can't happen in comfort. That can't happen in convenience. That only happens in the fire. The wilderness is where those changes take place, not to diminish you, but to develop you. When you come out of the wilderness, you'll have something you didn't have before. Authority. Not just knowledge, not just experience, but real, rooted, tested authority. Because now your words carry weight. Your presence has depth. You've walked through fire and didn't burn. You've been through storms and didn't break. People can feel that. Doors open because of that. That's not charisma, that's character. That's not hype, that's history. You earned it. You walked through it. You didn't skip steps. And now, you're trusted with more because you were faithful with less. You'll also carry empathy, because the wilderness humbles you. It makes you soft in the right places. It teaches you to see people with more compassion and less judgment. You remember what it's like to be broken, to be in between, to be unsure. And so you stop pretending, you stop performing, you become safe for others because you've faced your own pain. The wilderness turns leaders into servants. It takes ego and replaces it with authenticity. And that kind of person doesn't just succeed, they make space for others to succeed too. You don't need to fear the wilderness. You need to frame it differently. It's not where dreams die, it's where character is born. It's not a place of failure. It's a place of formation. You're not forgotten, you're being focused. You're not behind, you're being built. And when the time comes, when the doors open, when the spotlight hits, you won't be shaken. Because you didn't skip the season that taught you who you really are. You'll walk in purpose, not because you hustled your way to it, but because you were prepared for it. This is not the end. This is not a punishment. This is preparation. Stay with it. Walk through it. You're not alone. You're not off track. You're being made. You're being molded. The wilderness is working. Let it finish what it started. Let it shape the version of you that can carry the next level. You're not just surviving it, you're being strengthened by it. This is where warriors are born. This is where leaders are tested. This is where purpose takes root. The wilderness isn't the enemy. It's the entrance. And when you come out, you'll never be the same. 3. You don't grow in the spotlight. You grow in the shadows. Growth doesn't happen where most people look. It doesn't happen on the stage. It doesn't happen when everyone is clapping. It doesn't happen in the moment when everyone's watching you rise. It happens in silence, in solitude, in obscurity. It happens in the shadows where no one sees the grind, the tears, the decisions, the setbacks, the late nights, the early mornings. That's where the foundation is built, because you don't grow in the spotlight, you grow in the shadows. You grow when nobody's asking for your autograph, when nobody's reposting your victories, when nobody's applauding your faithfulness. That's where real growth is born. The problem is, too many people want the fruit without the root. They want the platform without the process. They want the followers without the foundation. But anything that rises without depth will fall under pressure. It might look good for a season, but it won't last. Because what sustains you in the spotlight is what you developed in the shadows. When the light hits you, it exposes you, not just your gifts, but your gaps. And if you didn't use the dark season to deal with what's underneath, the light will make it collapse. The shadows are sacred. It's where you train when no one is watching. It's where you discipline your desires. It's where you develop habits that carry you further than motivation ever could. The shadows are the gym where character is built, where ego is crushed, where humility is born. They don't feel glamorous, they don't look impressive, but they are absolutely necessary. Because when you get to where you're going, you won't have time to start building the foundation. You'll have to stand on what you already laid down in secret. Everybody wants to shine, but not everybody wants to be shaped. Everybody wants results, but not everybody wants refinement. The shadows demand you keep showing up when no one sees, that you keep believing when nothing's moving, that you stay faithful when it would be easier to quit. It's a lonely place, but it's also a launching place. Because if you can't handle being hidden, you won't survive being seen. The shadows teach you how to stay grounded when the spotlight comes, how to remain anchored when the applause fades, how to stay consistent when the pressure increases. Real growth is slow. It's steady. It's not flashy. It's not viral. It's deep, painful, and powerful. Because the shadows force you to confront what the spotlight allows you to hide. Your insecurities, your fears, your envy, your motives, all of it surfaces when the noise is gone. And if you dare to stay in that place, if you dare to remain long enough to wrestle, to refine, to rebuild, then what comes out of it won't just impress people, it will impact them. Because it's real. It's not performance, it's purpose. So many people rush out of the shadows too quickly. They get a taste of affirmation and abandon the assignment. They feel the pull of attention and leave behind the preparation. But fruit that ripens too early always rots. If you step out before you're ready, the weight of visibility will crush what immaturity refuses to carry. That's why the shadows are a gift. They delay the reveal so the work can get done. So you're not stepping into rooms you haven't developed the wisdom to walk through. So you're not building a brand bigger than your character can support. There's a quietness to growth that most people underestimate. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's decisions made in silence. It's discipline when no one's clapping. It's commitment when no one's checking. You show up because you're called, not because you're seen. You keep building because you believe, not because you're being broadcast. That's the kind of growth that sustains momentum. That's the kind of maturity that multiplies. It's not in your public moments, it's in your private ones. In the choices you make when no one is around. In the effort you give when no one is paying attention. Think about the seed. It grows underground before it breaks through the surface. It takes root in darkness before it rises in the light. If you dig it up too soon to show progress, you'll kill its potential. But if you let it stay hidden, if you let it do the quiet, unseen work, it will grow into something unstoppable. The same is true for you. Stop resenting your hidden season. Stop despising your shadows. They're not signs that you're behind, they're signs that you're being built. You're developing roots. You're gaining strength. You're becoming someone the spotlight can't break. The shadows also test your why. Why are you doing this? If it's for validation, you'll quit when nobody notices. If it's for attention, you'll collapse when you're overlooked. But if it's because you're called, if it's because something deep inside you knows you were made for more, then you'll stay, you'll grind, you'll endure. Because you're not performing, you're preparing. The shadows ask, do you believe enough to build without applause? That answer determines everything. Because the moment you no longer need to be seen is the moment you're ready to be used. You have to become the kind of person who is just as passionate when no one is clapping, just as focused when no one is filming, just as committed when no one is complimenting you. That's how greatness is built. Not in moments of attention, but in the consistency of obscurity. That's how legacies are formed. That's how impact is birthed. Not in trending clips, but in the 1,000 silent reps nobody ever sees. Too often we glamorize the breakthrough and forget the breaking. We admire the outcome and ignore the obscurity. But it's in the long, invisible hours that the champions are formed. It's when the lights are off that your mindset is tested. Can you encourage yourself? Can you push past tired? Can you train without trophies? That's where winners are made. In the dark, in the quiet, in the discipline. It doesn't feel good, but it forges the kind of person who won't fall when the pressure hits. The spotlight is not the goal. The goal is strength. The goal is stewardship. The goal is sustainability. That's what the shadows give you. They remove the hype so only the real remains. They strip away pride. They burn away comparison. They refine your voice. They build your endurance. And most of all, they reveal what you really believe. Because when there's no applause, no crowd, no approval, what's left? That's the real you. And that version of you is the one that changes lives. That version of you is the one the world is waiting on. Not the performance, the purpose. Don't try to escape the shadows too fast. There's still work to do. There's still layers to shed. There's still lessons to learn. You might feel unseen, but you're not unworthy. You might feel delayed, but you're not denied. You're in process. And process is never wasted. If you trust it, if you keep showing up, if you keep honoring the assignment, the day will come when what you built in secret becomes a foundation for something far greater than you imagined. But by then, the spotlight won't matter like it used to. You won't need it to feel worthy. You won't chase it for validation. You'll be anchored. You'll be ready. Because you didn't skip the shadows. You didn't rush the growth. You didn't abandon the process. You embraced it. And now you're not just visible, you're valuable. You're not just seen, you're seasoned. You're not just rising, you're ready. Because the shadows did their job. And you grew exactly where you were supposed to. In the quiet, in the stillness, in the place where purpose grows best. 4. Comfort is a cage when you're called to conquer. Comfort isn't always kindness. Sometimes it's a trap dressed in peace. It feels safe. It feels manageable. It gives you the illusion of control. But if you're not careful, comfort will convince you that staying the same is success, that playing small is wisdom, that shrinking is strategic, and before you know it, you've built a whole life around what's easy, not what's extraordinary. You're stuck in a version of yourself you were never meant to remain in. Because comfort is a cage when you're called to conquer. Everything about growth is uncomfortable. It stretches you. It scares you. It calls out the lazy parts, the doubtful parts, the fearful parts. It confronts your excuses. It challenges your identity. And that's why most people won't do it. Not because they're incapable, but because they're unwilling to be uncomfortable long enough to change. They crave convenience more than calling. They want elevation without endurance. But you don't conquer anything you're not willing to confront. And you don't overcome anything you're not willing to outgrow. Look around at your life. What are you settling for because it's familiar? What are you tolerating because it's manageable? What dream have you downsized to fit inside your comfort zone? That zone was never meant to be your home, it was meant to be your launching pad. But too many people build houses in places they were only supposed to pass through. And the longer you stay in that place, the harder it gets to leave. Not because you can't, but because you've grown attached to your limitations. You've mistaken predictability for purpose. The uncomfortable truth is that greatness doesn't grow in ease. It grows in friction. It grows in resistance. It grows in challenge. Think about your muscles, they only develop under pressure. They only expand when pushed past their limits. The same is true of your mindset, your faith, your work ethic, your vision. If you're not stretching, you're not growing. And if you're not growing, you're decaying. There is no neutral in your calling. You're either moving forward or slowly giving up. And comfort will always offer you a seat in the second row of your own life. You weren't built for the back seat. You weren't created to coast. There's too much in you to settle, too much purpose to play it safe, too much vision to play it small. But you've got to be willing to disrupt the comfort. You've got to disturb the norm. You've got to get so sick of playing beneath your potential that the pain of staying becomes greater than the fear of changing. That's when transformation begins. Not when you feel ready, but when you feel restless. When you finally admit that the life you're living is too small for the person you're becoming. That's when you rise. That's when you break out. That's when you stop negotiating with mediocrity. Because deep down, you know you're meant for more. But here's the truth. More costs more. It costs security. It costs routine. It costs your comfort. You will never conquer what you're not willing to be inconvenienced by. You will never rise while clinging to what was. You will never dominate your calling if you're still worshiping your convenience. You've got to let go of what feels good to grab hold of what's truly great. It starts with the mindset. You've got to rewire what comfort means to you. Stop seeing it as a reward and start seeing it as resistance. Stop using it as a measuring stick for success. Comfort isn't confirmation that you're on the right path. Often, it's a signal that you stopped walking. You've paused progress. You've camped in complacency. Real progress feels like discomfort. It feels like challenge. It feels like uncertainty. But it also feels like possibility, like power, like potential awakening inside of you. Everything you're dreaming about lives on the other side of your comfort zone. The opportunities, the growth, the breakthrough sits all outside the walls you've built to protect yourself. And the longer you wait for those things to come inside your bubble, the longer you delay your destiny. They're not coming to your comfort. You've got to go to them. You've got to walk through fear, through doubt, through failure. That's the price of conquering. That's the path of calling. And there's no shortcut around it. People think fear is the enemy, but it's not. Comfort is. Fear will at least let you know where the edge is. Comfort will lie to you and tell you that there's no edge at all. It'll numb your instincts. It'll lull you to sleep. And while you're sleeping, life is passing. Dreams are dying. Potential is rusting. Because comfort doesn't just slow you down, it kills your fight. It whispers, why try? Why risk? Why stretch? And before you know it, the fire inside becomes a flicker. But the conqueror in you doesn't die, it just goes dormant. It waits for the moment you decide enough is enough. The moment you get tired of being tired. The moment you get honest about the gap between who you are and who you were born to be. And when that moment comes, everything changes. Not because the conditions are perfect, but because your conviction becomes stronger than your craving for comfort. And that shift is everything. You start choosing challenge over convenience, growth over gratification, purpose over predictability. You start running toward what scares you instead of away from it. You start speaking what you believe instead of shrinking to please. You start owning your future instead of outsourcing your responsibility. That's when the cage cracks. That's when the conqueror comes alive. Not when you feel powerful, but when you start moving even when you don't. You'll be misunderstood. You'll be criticized. You'll be doubted, but you won't be stopped. Because you're no longer feeding off applause, you're fueled by assignment. You're no longer looking for ease, you're looking for evolution. You're no longer waiting for permission, you're walking in purpose. And that kind of energy can't be contained by comfort. It breaks through every barrier. It transcends every excuse. It walks through every fire. Because when you're called to conquer, you don't need conditions to be perfect. You just need commitment to be permanent. The cage might still be there. The fear, the pressure, the temptation to settle, it'll still show up. But now you've changed. Now you recognize the lies. Now you've built the mental muscle. Now you've chosen calling over comfort so many times that it's no longer foreign, it's your default. You've trained your soul to expect resistance. You've normalized discomfort. You've fallen in love with the process, not just the prize. And that's what keeps you moving when nothing around you says you should. Because here's the truth. Comfort is temporary, but calling is eternal. Convenience fades, ease disappears. But what you build through courage lasts. What you conquer through consistency multiplies. That's the legacy, that's the mission, that's the assignment. You weren't called to fit in, you were called to rise up, to step out, to stand firm. And no amount of comfort is worth sacrificing that. So every time you feel the temptation to shrink, remind yourself, you weren't created for the cage. You were created to conquer. Every time you hear the voice saying, stay safe, answer it with, I'm not here to survive, I'm here to soar. Every time doubt whispers, what if you fail? Respond with, what if I win? Because the real failure is never the fall, it's the refusal to fly in the first place. Conquering isn't just about what you do, it's about who you become. And who you become will always be a reflection of what you're willing to leave behind. Leave the comfort, leave the fear. Leave the small thinking, leave the self-sabotage, leave the doubt, and walk forward. Step into the unknown, run toward the challenge, push past the pain. Because beyond it all is the life that was waiting on you to wake up and walk out of the cage you were never meant to stay in. Comfort is a liar, a thief, a seducer. It talks smooth but steals silently. Don't listen. Don't wait. Don't waste another day negotiating with a version of you that's already expired. Rise. Move. Shift. Break free. Not because you have all the answers, but because you finally realized the cage was never locked. And everything you're waiting on is waiting on you to decide you're done living small. You're ready to conquer.